Gene Park stood frozen in the middle of Los Angeles International Airport. His expensive black suit fit him perfectly, and his short black hair was styled without a single strand out of place. But right now, all the color had drained from his face. His hands were shaking slightly at his sides. Next to him stood Victoria, his fiancée. She wore a cream designer dress and a diamond engagement ring so big it caught the light every time she moved her hand. She was talking about wedding plans, but Gene wasn't hearing a word she said. His eyes were locked on a woman standing 50 feet away near Gate 42. May Williams stood there in simple blue jeans and a gray sweater. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She held the hand of a little boy who looked about 3 years old. The child had thick black hair, dark eyes, and a face that looked exactly like Jin's. Victoria noticed Jin's expression and stopped talking. She followed his gaze across the busy terminal. "Gene, who is that woman?" Victoria asked. "Why are you looking at her like that?" Before Gene could answer, May turned her head. Her eyes met Jin's across the crowded airport. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then May picked up her son and placed him on her hip. She started walking toward Gene and Victoria. Her heart was beating fast, but her face stayed calm. When May reached them, she stopped. The noise of the airport seemed to fade away. "Hello, Gene," May said quietly. "It's been a long time." Gene opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just stared at her and the little boy. The child looked at Gene with curious eyes. "Mama, who is this?" Daniel asked. May looked at her son, then back at Gene. "Just someone Mama used to know, baby." Victoria's face changed as she looked from May to the child to Gene. The diamond ring on her finger suddenly felt very heavy. What happened between Gene and May 3 years ago that made him leave her? Why does this little boy look exactly like Gene? And what will happen now that they've come face to face? Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this one. Tomorrow we're dropping another story you won't want to miss, and your support helps us bring you more powerful stories. Special thanks to our amazing viewers from the United States, Australia, Mexico, France, United Kingdom, Canada, Brazil, Japan, Jamaica, and so many other countries. You all are the reason we do this, and we appreciate every single one of you. Now let's begin. To understand what just happened at that airport, we need to go back 3 years. Gene Park was 32 years old when his life changed forever. He had come to America from Korea when he was 12 years old with his family. His father had tried to run a legitimate business, but it failed. Young Gene watched his family struggle and go hungry. He promised himself he would never be poor again. By the time Gene was in his 20s, he had built a powerful criminal organization in Los Angeles. He ran illegal operations that made him millions of dollars. Money laundering, protection rackets, and underground dealings were his world. People feared him. His business associates knew him as a man with no emotions, no weaknesses, and no mercy. Gene lived in a penthouse apartment with a view of the city. He wore expensive suits and drove luxury cars. He had power and wealth beyond what most people could dream of. But inside, he felt empty. He trusted no one, and no one really knew him. That was how he liked it. Emotions were dangerous in his line of work. One Tuesday evening, everything changed. It was raining hard in downtown Los Angeles. Gene had just left a business meeting that went badly. One of his associates had tried to cheat him, and Gene had to make it clear that wouldn't happen again. He was wet, angry, and tired. He saw a small diner called Rosie's Place and decided to go inside. The place was simple and clean, with red vinyl booths and white tables. The smell of coffee and home cooking filled the air. Gene slid into a booth near the back, water dripping from his suit jacket. A waitress walked over with a menu and a pot of coffee. She had warm brown eyes and a smile that seemed genuine. Her name tag said May. She wore the diner's blue uniform, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. "Rough evening?" May asked as she poured his coffee. Gene looked up at her, surprised. In his world, people either feared him or wanted something from him. This woman did neither. She just saw a wet, tired man who looked like he needed coffee. "You could say that," Gene replied. May smiled. "Well, the special tonight is meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans. It's really good. My recommendation if you're hungry." "I'll take it," Gene said. May brought him his food and refilled his coffee without him asking. She didn't hover or try to make conversation beyond what was polite. But there was something about her kindness that felt real. Gene came back to Rosie's Place the next week. He told himself it was because the food was good and the diner was quiet. But really, he wanted to see May again. He started coming every week, always sitting in May's section. They talked while she refilled his coffee. May told him about her life. She had grown up in a small town in Georgia, raised by her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident when she was 8 years old. Her grandmother had passed away the year before, and May had moved to Los Angeles to chase her dream of becoming a nurse. "I'm saving up for nursing school," May explained one evening. "It's expensive, but I'm getting there. I work double shifts when I can." "Why nursing?" Jean asked. May's face lit up. "Because I want to help people. I want to make a difference. My grandmother always said the best thing you can do in life is leave people better than you found them." Jean had never met anyone like May Williams. She worked hard, stayed positive, and genuinely cared about others. She didn't complain about her long hours or her small apartment. She just kept working toward her goal. After 3 months of weekly visits, Jean finally asked May out on a real date. She said yes with that bright smile of hers. They went to a small Italian restaurant in Santa Monica. Jean picked a place far from his usual expensive spots where people might recognize him. They ate pasta and talked for hours. After dinner, they walked on the beach with their shoes off, letting the cool water wash over their feet. "Tell me about your work," May said as they walked. "You said you run import-export businesses?" Jean had prepared this lie carefully. "Yes. I have several companies that bring goods from Korea and other Asian countries to sell in America. It keeps me busy. Do you like it?" May asked. No one had ever asked Jean that before. "It pays well," he said carefully. "That's not what I asked," May said with a gentle laugh. "Do you like it?" Jean thought about it. "I like the challenge, but it can be lonely." May squeezed his hand. "Well, you're not alone tonight." Over the next 8 months, Jean and May built a relationship. Jean found himself becoming a different person around her. He laughed more. He relaxed. He talked about things other than business and money. May made him feel normal, like he was just a regular guy dating a regular girl. They went to movies and tried new restaurants. May introduced Jean to her favorite places in Los Angeles. They spent Sunday mornings at farmers markets and evenings cooking dinner together in May's small apartment. Jean had never cooked a meal in his life, but May taught him how to make simple dishes. For the first time since he was a child in Korea, Jean felt happy. But he was living a lie. Every time May looked at him with trust and love, Jean felt guilty. She thought he was a businessman who worked long hours. She didn't know about the illegal money, the dangerous deals, or the violence that was part of his world. Jin's business associates noticed the change in him. They saw him smile more, leave meetings early, and check his phone constantly for messages from May. "Boss, this woman is making you soft," one of his men warned him. "People are noticing." "She's a weakness," another said. "If your enemies find out about her, they'll use her to get to you." Jin's family in Korea heard about May too. His mother called him, angry that he was dating someone who wasn't Korean. "You need to marry a proper Korean woman," his mother said. "This is disrespectful to our family." The pressure kept building from all sides. Jean knew his relationship with May put her in danger. Men in his position had enemies. If someone wanted to hurt Jean, the easiest way would be to hurt someone he loved. Jean loved May. He truly loved her. But he was afraid. Afraid to tell her the truth about his life. Afraid she would leave him if she knew. Afraid his world would destroy the goodness in her. So instead of being honest, instead of trusting May with the truth, Jean made a decision that would haunt him for years. He decided to leave. Jean convinced himself he was protecting May. He told himself she deserved better than a criminal who lived in constant danger. He believed she would move on, find a good man, and live a happy life. But really, Jean was protecting himself. He was afraid of being vulnerable. He was afraid of changing his life for someone else. He was a coward. Jean spent weeks planning how to disappear from May's life. He didn't plan how to tell her the truth or how to keep her safe while staying together. No, he planned how to vanish completely. He disconnected the phone number May had for him. He closed the office address he had given her. He made sure every trace of himself that May knew about would lead to nothing. One Sunday night, Jean stayed over at May's apartment. They cooked dinner together, watched a movie, and fell asleep on her small couch. May felt safe and loved in his arms. When May woke up Monday morning, Jean was gone. At first, she thought he had just left early for work. But his keys were gone from the hook by the door. His jacket wasn't on her chair. It felt different somehow. May called his phone. Disconnected. She called again, thinking maybe she dialed wrong. Still disconnected. She got ready for her shift at the diner, telling herself Gene would call soon to explain. Maybe his phone broke. Maybe there was an emergency. But Gene didn't call that day, or the next day, or the day after that. By the end of the week, May was worried sick. She went to the office building where Gene said he worked. The security guard looked at the business card May showed him and shook his head. "No one by that name works here," the guard said. "Never has." May felt her stomach drop. She went to another address Gene had given her once. It was an empty warehouse with a for lease sign out front. Everything Gene had told her was a lie. Or at least, the parts she could check were lies. He had disappeared like he never existed. May went home and cried. She cried for days. Her co-workers at Rosie's place tried to comfort her, but May couldn't understand what had happened. What had she done wrong? Had she said something to make him leave? Had she not been good enough? The questions ate at her. She couldn't sleep. She barely ate. She went through her memories of their 8 months together, searching for signs she had missed. Rosie, the owner of the diner, sat with May during a slow afternoon shift. "Baby girl, some men are just like that," Rosie said gently. "They come into your life, make you believe in something, then leave without explanation. It's not about you. It's about their own brokenness." "But why couldn't he just tell me?" May asked, tears running down her face. "If he wanted to end things, why not just say so? Why disappear like I meant nothing?" Rosie had no answer for that. Weeks turned into months. May slowly started to function again. She went to work, came home, and tried to build a life without Gene. The pain was still there, but it became duller. She told herself she would move on eventually. 2 months after Gene disappeared, May woke up feeling sick. She thought it was the flu at first. But when the nausea continued for a week, she bought a pregnancy test from the drugstore. May sat on the bathroom floor of her tiny apartment, staring at the positive test in her hands. Pregnant. She was pregnant and completely alone. Fear washed over her. She had no family in Los Angeles. Her grandmother was gone. She barely made enough money to support herself, let alone a baby. Her savings for nursing school were small. May cried until she had no tears left. Then she looked at the test again and made a decision. This baby was hers. She would find a way to make it work. The pregnancy was hard. May had morning sickness, so bad she could barely work some days. But she needed every shift she could get. She told Rosie about the baby, and her boss was kind. "You work as much as you can, and when you need to sit down, you sit down," Rosie said. "We'll figure it out." The other waitresses covered for May when she needed breaks. They brought her crackers when she felt sick. They became her family. May worked at the diner until she was 8 months pregnant. By then, her feet were so swollen she could barely stand, but she needed the money. Every dollar went into a jar for baby supplies. She gave birth to Daniel at County General Hospital on a Tuesday morning. The labor was long and painful, and May went through it alone. No partner holding her hand. No family waiting outside. Just May and the nurses. But when they placed Daniel in her arms for the first time, something changed inside May. She looked down at his tiny face, his perfect little fingers, and felt a love so powerful it took her breath away. "Hi, baby," May whispered to him. "I'm your mama, and I promise you, I'm going to give you the best life I can." She named him Daniel, after her father. He had thick black hair and eyes that would later turn dark brown, just like his father's. But May tried not to think about Gene when she looked at her son. Daniel was hers. The hospital social worker came to talk to May before she was discharged. "Do you have support at home?" the woman asked gently. "Family? A partner?" "No," May said honestly. "But I have a job and an apartment. We'll be okay." The social worker looked concerned, but didn't push. She gave May information about programs that could help and wished her luck. May brought Daniel home to her small apartment. She had bought a used crib from a thrift store and washed all the baby clothes she found at yard sales. It wasn't much, but it was what she could afford. The first few months were the hardest of May's life. Daniel cried a lot, especially at night. May was exhausted from lack of sleep. Money was so tight she often skipped meals to make sure she could buy formula and diapers. Her neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Chun, heard the baby crying through the thin walls and knocked on May's door one day. "I can watch the baby during your work shifts," Mrs. Chun offered. "My own grandchildren are grown and far away. I miss having a little one around." May cried with relief and gratitude. Mrs. Chun became a blessing, watching Daniel while May worked at the diner. All of May's dreams of nursing school faded away. The money she had saved went to keeping Daniel fed and clothed. But when May looked at her son's face, she didn't regret it. He was worth everything. What May didn't know was that Jean knew about Daniel. Jean had people who kept watch over May from a distance. When she was 5 months pregnant, one of Jin's men reported it to him. Jean had stood outside the hospital the day Daniel was born, wanting desperately to go inside, but unable to make himself do it. He saw May bring Daniel home. He knew about every struggle she faced. He had someone leave an envelope of cash in her mailbox once, anonymously, when he knew her rent was due and she was short. But Jean never approached her. He told himself May was safer without him. He convinced himself that his dangerous life would put her and Daniel at risk. If his enemies knew he had a son, they would use that against him. The truth was Jean was afraid. Afraid to face what he had done. Afraid to see the hurt in May's eyes. Afraid to be a father when he didn't know how. So he stayed away, watching from the shadows while guilt ate him alive. Jean threw himself into his work. He became colder, more ruthless than before. His business grew, and so did his reputation. People feared him even more. He made more money than he could spend. But late at night in his empty penthouse, Jean thought about May and Daniel. He wondered if his son had taken his first steps yet. He wondered if Daniel looked like him. He wondered if May told Daniel about his father, or if she hated Jean too much to speak his name. The guilt never left him, but neither did his cowardice. 2.5 years passed like this. May built a life for herself and Daniel through hard work and determination. She was tired all the time and struggled with money, but Daniel was healthy and happy. He was a bright little boy who loved to laugh and ask questions about everything. May told herself they didn't need Jean. She had learned to be both mother and father to Daniel. She was stronger than she ever knew she could be. But sometimes, late at night when Daniel was asleep, May wondered where Jean was and why he had left. She wondered if he ever thought about her. She wondered if he knew he had a son. May tried to let go of those questions. She focused on the present, on getting through each day, on giving Daniel the best childhood she could manage. What neither May nor Jean knew was that fate would bring them face to face again. And when it did, everything would change. 2 years after Daniel was born, Jin's life took another turn. His family in Korea had been pressuring him for years to get married and settle down. They knew nothing about May or Daniel. Jean had kept that part of his life completely hidden. His mother arranged for him to meet Victoria Chin. She came from a wealthy Korean-American family in Chicago. Her father owned a successful law firm, and Victoria herself was a corporate lawyer with an impressive reputation. The meeting was set up like a business transaction, which was exactly how Jean preferred to handle things now. No emotions, no complications, just a practical arrangement. Victoria was beautiful, intelligent, and ambitious. She had long black hair, always dressed in designer clothes, and carried herself with confidence. When they first met for dinner at an expensive restaurant in Los Angeles, Jean could see that she was examining him just as carefully as he was examining her. "Let me be honest," Victoria said over their appetizers. "I know this meeting was arranged by our families. I'm 31 years old, and I'm ready to settle down. But I'm not looking for a fairy tale romance. I want a partnership with someone who understands that marriage can be mutually beneficial." Jean appreciated her directness. "What are you looking for in a partner?" "Stability. Respect. Someone who won't interfere with my career. I'll handle the social aspects of your life, give you the respectability that comes with a proper marriage. In return, I expect financial security and freedom to continue my work." It was cold and practical. Perfect for someone like Jean who had locked his heart away after May. "I can offer all of that," Jean said. They dated for 4 months, though it was nothing like Jin's relationship with May had been. He and Victoria went to business dinners together. They attended social events. They were seen at the right places by the right people. But there was no real warmth between them. It was comfortable and safe. Victoria never asked too many questions about Jin's business. She was smart enough to know not to look too closely at where all his money came from. As a lawyer, she probably suspected his operations weren't entirely legal, but she chose not to dig deeper. After 4 months, Jean proposed. It wasn't romantic. They were having dinner at her apartment, and he simply pulled out a ring. "This arrangement is working well," Jean said. "We should make it official." Victoria looked at the ring, a large diamond that cost more than most people made in a year. She smiled and held out her hand. "Yes, that makes sense," she said. They set a wedding date for 3 months away. Victoria's parents were excited and immediately started planning. They would fly from Chicago to Los Angeles to meet Jean properly and begin organizing the wedding. The date was set for a Tuesday in late September. Meanwhile, across the city at Rosie's place, May's life was about to change too. Every Sunday morning, an older woman named Mrs. Patterson came to the diner for breakfast. She always ordered the same thing: scrambled eggs, wheat toast, and black coffee. She always sat in May's section. Mrs. Patterson was a retired nurse who had worked at County General Hospital for 35 years. She was white-haired, kind-faced, and observant. Over the months, she had watched May work tirelessly, always with a smile despite the exhaustion in her eyes. May often talked about Daniel during their brief conversations. Her face would light up when she mentioned her son. She also sometimes talked about her dream of nursing school, though she always said it quickly like it was something she had accepted would never happen. One Sunday, Mrs. Patterson stayed after finishing her breakfast. She waited until May's section was quiet. "May, dear, can you sit with me for a moment?" Mrs. Patterson asked. May glanced around, saw that her other tables were fine, and slid into the booth across from the older woman. "I've been watching you for over a year now," Mrs. Patterson said. "You work harder than anyone I've ever seen. You're kind to everyone, even the rude customers. And you're raising a child on your own while holding on to dreams you think are impossible." May felt uncomfortable with the attention. "I'm just doing what I need to do, Mrs. Patterson." "I know," the older woman said. "And that's exactly why I want to help you. I have connections at a nursing school in Chicago. It's a good program, and I can help you get accepted. There's a scholarship available for single mothers that would cover most of your tuition." May's heart started beating faster. "Chicago? That's so far away." "It's also a fresh start," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "My sister owns a small apartment building there. She could offer you affordable housing. The cost of living is lower than Los Angeles. You could actually make this work, May." May felt tears forming in her eyes. "Why would you do this for me?" Mrs. Patterson smiled. "Because I was you once. 30 years ago, I was a young single mother working at a diner, thinking nursing school was impossible. Someone helped me, and I promised myself I would pass that kindness forward when I could. You remind me of myself. Don't let your dreams die, May." May went home that night and thought about the offer. Chicago was far from Los Angeles. She would be leaving the only place she had known since Georgia. But what did Los Angeles have for her besides painful memories and a job that would never pay enough for her dreams? For Daniel, she needed to do more. He deserved a mother who was thriving, not just surviving. After a week of thinking, May called Mrs. Patterson and accepted the offer. The nursing school acceptance came through in July. May would start classes in late September. Mrs. Patterson's sister had an apartment ready for them at a price May could actually afford. Everything was falling into place. May gave Rosie notice at the diner. Her boss cried and hugged her tight. "You go make something of yourself, baby girl," Rosie said. "You deserve every good thing coming your way." May packed up her small apartment. Everything she and Daniel owned fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. She sold or gave away her furniture. She bought 2 plane tickets to Chicago for a Tuesday in late September, the same Tuesday that Victoria's parents were flying from Chicago to Los Angeles. May didn't know this, of course. She had no idea that Jean was even still in Los Angeles. She hadn't thought about him in months. She was focused on the future, on her new beginning, on giving Daniel opportunities she never had. The Tuesday morning arrived. May woke up early, got Daniel dressed in his favorite shirt with dinosaurs on it, and took one last look at the apartment that had been their home. "We're going on an airplane, Mama?" Daniel asked excitedly. He was 3.5 years old now, talking in full sentences and curious about everything. "Yes, baby," May said, kissing his forehead. "We're starting a new adventure." They took a cab to Los Angeles International Airport. May checked their bags and got their boarding passes. Their flight was scheduled to leave at 2 in the afternoon. At the same time, Jean and Victoria arrived at the airport. Victoria's parents' flight from Chicago was landing at 1:30. They planned to meet them at the gate, then go to lunch to discuss wedding plans. Victoria was excited, talking nonstop about the venue she had chosen, the flowers she wanted, the guest list that kept growing. Jean nodded and made appropriate sounds, but his mind was elsewhere. He had a business problem. A shipment that should have arrived hadn't shown up. Money was missing from one of his accounts. He was distracted, thinking through solutions, barely hearing Victoria's words. They stood near Gate 38, waiting for the arrival announcement. Victoria checked her phone, confirming her parents' flight was on time. Across the terminal at Gate 42, May's flight was delayed by an hour. The announcement came over the speakers, and May sighed. She had been nervous about the flight, and now they would have to wait even longer. "Can I have a snack, Mama?" Daniel asked. "Sure, baby," May said. She bought him crackers and a juice box from a nearby shop. They sat near the big windows watching planes take off and land. Daniel pressed his nose against the glass, fascinated. Jin's eyes automatically scanned the terminal. It was a habit from years of watching for threats, always aware of his surroundings. His gaze moved over the crowds of travelers, families saying goodbye, business people rushing to their gates. Then his eyes stopped. 50 feet away, near the windows at Gate 42, stood a woman with her hair in a ponytail. She was bending down, wiping something off a child's face. Even from behind, even after 3 years, Jin recognized her immediately. May. His heart, which he had trained to stay calm in the most dangerous situations, started pounding. The blood drained from his face. His hands went cold. May straightened up, holding Daniel's hand. The little boy turned his head, and Jin saw his face clearly for the first time. The child had Jin's hair, Jin's eyes, Jin's face shape. There was no question. This was his son. Jin couldn't breathe. 3 years of guilt, regret, and buried emotions crashed over him all at once. He stood frozen, unable to look away from May and Daniel. Victoria noticed his expression. She followed his gaze across the terminal. Jin, what's wrong?" she asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Jin couldn't answer. He couldn't move. He just stared. May turned slightly, laughing at something Daniel said. Then her eyes swept across the busy terminal. They landed on Jin. Time stopped. May's smile disappeared the instant she saw Jin. The color left her face. Her hand tightened around Daniel's, holding him closer to her. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. The busy airport continued around them, but in that moment, it felt like they were the only 2 people in the world. 3 years. 3 years of silence. 3 years of raising their son alone. 3 years of unanswered questions. And there he was, standing across the terminal like he had every right to be there. May's first emotion was shock. Then came the anger, hot and fast, rising in her chest. But when she looked down at Daniel, who was tugging on her hand and asking about their plane, the anger shifted into something else. A fierce need to protect her son. A sudden awareness of her own strength. She had survived Jin leaving. She had built a life from nothing. She had raised a beautiful, happy child without his help. She didn't need his approval or his presence. But Daniel deserved to know his father existed. And May deserved answers to the questions that had haunted her for 3 years. May made her decision quickly. She picked up Daniel and settled him on her hip. She took a deep breath and started walking toward Jin. Jin watched her approach, his body completely tense. Every step May took toward him felt like it took forever. Victoria had followed his gaze and was now staring at May with growing concern and confusion. "Jin, who is that woman?" Victoria asked again, her voice sharper. "And why are you looking at her like that?" Jin still couldn't speak. His eyes were locked on May and the child in her arms. May stopped a few feet away from them. Up close, she could see that Jin looked older. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. His expensive suit probably cost more than May made in 3 months. And next to him stood a woman who looked like she belonged in a fashion magazine, wearing a diamond ring that caught the light. "Hello, Jin," May said quietly. Her voice was steady, even though her heart felt like it might beat out of her chest. "It's been a long time." Jin's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Daniel, then at May, then back at Daniel. His face had gone completely pale. Daniel looked at the strangers with wide, curious eyes. He didn't understand why his mother seemed upset, or why this man was staring at them so intensely. "May," Jin finally managed to say. His voice came out rough and broken. I didn't know you would be here." "Why would you?" May said. There was an edge to her voice now. "It's not like we've talked in 3 years." Victoria stepped closer to Jin. Her sharp lawyer mind was working fast, putting pieces together. The way Jin was staring at the child. The woman's words about 3 years. The boy's age. The timeline. Jean, Victoria said slowly, her voice dangerously calm. Who is this woman? And who is that child? May looked at Victoria properly for the first time. She saw the expensive clothes, the perfect hair, the engagement ring. She felt a bitter laugh building in her throat, but pushed it down. I'm May Williams, she said, meeting Victoria's eyes. And this is Daniel. I used to know Jean a few years ago. The word used carried so much weight. Used to know. Used to love. Used to trust. Used to believe in. Jin's eyes were still fixed on Daniel. He was drinking in every detail of his son's face. The boy had his mother's warm brown skin and his father's thick black hair. His eyes were dark and curious. He looked healthy and happy. Mama, who is this? Daniel asked, pressing closer to May. May's heart broke a little at the question. She kissed Daniel's forehead, then looked directly at Jean. Just someone Mama used to know, baby. Victoria's face had changed from confused to suspicious to understanding. She looked at Jean, then at the child, then back at Jean. How old is he? Victoria asked quietly. 3.5, May answered, still looking at Jean. Victoria closed her eyes for a moment, doing the math. 3.5 years ago was before she met Jean, but the timing was close. Very close. Jean, Victoria said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Is that your child? Jean finally tore his eyes away from Daniel to look at Victoria. He opened his mouth, and May could see him considering lying. She could see the wheels turning in his head, looking for a way out. Don't you dare lie right now, May said sharply. Don't you dare stand there and deny him. You've done enough damage already. Jean flinched like May had hit him. He looked back at Daniel, then at Victoria. Yes, he said quietly. He's my son. The words hung in the air. Victoria's expression hardened. May felt tears threatening, but blinked them back. Daniel sensed the tension and hugged his mother's neck tighter. I can't believe this, Victoria said, stepping away from Jean. We're engaged. We're planning a wedding. And you never thought to mention you have a child. I didn't know how to tell you, Jean said. It sounded weak even to his own ears. You didn't know how to tell me? Victoria's voice rose slightly. That's your excuse? May almost felt sorry for Victoria. Almost. But right now, May's focus was on the man who had abandoned her. You knew about him, May said suddenly. It wasn't a question. The way Jean was looking at Daniel, like he was memorizing him, like he had been waiting to see him. You knew I was pregnant. You knew about Daniel. Jin's silence was all the answer she needed. How long have you known? May demanded. Since you were 5 months along, Jean admitted quietly. I had people checking on you, making sure you were safe. The anger that May had been controlling exploded. You knew. Her voice shook. You knew I was pregnant and alone and struggling, and you stayed away? You watched from a distance like some kind of creep instead of being a man and facing what you did. Other travelers were starting to notice the confrontation. Some glanced over curiously before hurrying past. Jean took a step toward May. I thought I was protecting you. I thought my life was too dangerous, that you and Daniel would be safer without me. That's garbage, May said flatly. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourself. You were too much of a coward to face the consequences of your choices. Each word hit Jean like a physical blow. He had no defense because May was absolutely right. I was wrong, Jean said desperately. I know I was wrong. I've regretted it every single day. Regret doesn't change anything, May said. Her voice dropped lower, more controlled. Regret doesn't erase the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what I did wrong. Regret doesn't pay for the diapers I couldn't afford. Regret doesn't replace you being there for Daniel's first words, his first steps, his first everything. Daniel was watching his mother's face, confused by her tears. Mama, why are you sad? May wiped her eyes quickly and kissed his head. It's okay, baby. Mama's okay. The boarding announcement for May's flight came over the speakers. First call for passengers. That's our flight, May said. She looked at Jean one last time. I spent 3 years wondering why you left. I blamed myself. I thought I wasn't good enough, wasn't pretty enough, wasn't something enough. But looking at you now, I realize it was never about me. It was about you being a coward. May, please, Jean said. Tears were forming in his eyes. Please don't leave like this. Let me explain. Let me be part of his life. I want to know my son. Biology doesn't make you a father, May said firmly. Being there makes you a father. Love makes you a father. Sacrifice makes you a father. You're just a stranger who shares his DNA. Victoria was watching the exchange with a complicated expression. Her anger at Jean was clear, but there was something else there too. Maybe respect for May's strength. Maybe pity for the situation. The second boarding call announced. "We need to go," May said. She adjusted Daniel on her hip. "Wait," Jean said desperately, reaching out but not quite touching her. "Please, can I at least know where you'll be? How to contact you?" May hesitated. Every instinct told her to walk away and never look back, to protect herself and Daniel from any more pain. But she looked at her son, thought about him growing up with questions about his father, and made a hard decision. "I'm not going to keep Daniel from knowing who you are," May said carefully. "When he's older, if he wants to know you, that will be his choice. But for now, we need to go build our new life." "Where are you going?" Jean asked. "Chicago. I got into nursing school. I'm finally going to chase my dreams." Something flickered across Jin's face. Sadness, maybe. Or regret that May was doing this without him. "Can I have your contact information?" Jean asked. "Please. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking to suddenly be in his life. I need to know I can reach you. That someday maybe I can prove I've changed." May looked at Victoria. "Do you have something to write with?" Victoria, despite everything, pulled a pen and small notepad from her designer purse. May wrote down her new address and phone number in Chicago. She handed it to Victoria, not Jean. "If he's serious about wanting to be in Daniel's life someday, he can reach out," May said to Victoria. "But if you do," she turned to Jean, "you better be ready to show up and stay. I won't let you break his heart the way you broke mine. I won't let him spend his childhood wondering why his father doesn't want him." "I do want him," Jean said, his voice cracking. "I want both of you. I made a terrible mistake." "You made a choice," May corrected. "You chose to leave. You chose to stay away. Now I'm choosing to leave and build a life without you. Maybe someday, if you become someone worth knowing, Daniel can make his own choice about having you in his life." The final boarding call came. "I have to go," May said. She looked at Jean one more time. Despite everything, despite the pain and anger, she saw genuine regret in his eyes. She saw a man broken by his own choices. "Goodbye, Jean." May turned and walked toward the gate. She didn't look back. Daniel waved at the strangers over her shoulder, innocent and friendly, not understanding he had just met his father. Jean stood frozen, watching them disappear into the boarding area. His son was walking away, and it was his own fault. Victoria stood next to him in silence for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold. "I assume that changes our wedding plans." Jean turned to look at her. Victoria's face was a mix of anger, hurt, and something that looked like disappointment. "I'm sorry, Victoria," Jean said quietly. "You deserve better than this. Better than me." Victoria laughed bitterly. "I thought I knew what I was getting into with you, Jean. I thought we had an understanding. But you kept a whole child's secret from me. A child you knew about for 3 years. I know. My parents are about to land. They're expecting to plan a wedding. What am I supposed to tell them?" Jean had no answer. Victoria pulled the engagement ring off her finger. It was a beautiful ring, expensive and flawless. She placed it in Jin's hand. "I won't marry a man who loves someone else," she said simply. "What?" Jean looked confused. "Did you really think I couldn't see it?" Victoria said. "The way you looked at her. The way you fell apart when you saw her. That wasn't just guilt, Jean. That was love. You love her. You probably never stopped loving her." Jean closed his hand around the ring. He couldn't deny it. "I'm practical about a lot of things," Victoria continued. "But I have enough self-respect not to marry a man whose heart belongs to someone else. Especially when that someone else just walked away with his child." "I understand," Jean said. Victoria picked up her purse. "My parents will be disappointed. So will yours. But that's your problem now, not mine. Goodbye, Jean. I hope you figure out how to fix the mess you've made." She walked away, her heels clicking on the terminal floor. Jean watched her go, then looked down at the engagement ring in his hand. In the space of 10 minutes, he had lost everything. His fiancée, his wedding, his chance with May. And worst of all, he had watched his son walk away, not even knowing who his father was. Jean stood alone in the terminal, holding a ring for a wedding that would never happen, staring at the gate where May and Daniel had disappeared. For the first time in years, Jean Park, the man who had built a criminal empire and faced down dangerous enemies without fear, broke down and cried. Jean stood in that airport terminal for a long time after May's plane took off. People rushed past him, living their normal lives, while his entire world had just fallen apart. He held Victoria's engagement ring in one hand, the piece of paper with May's contact information in the other. For 3 years, Jean had told himself a story. He had convinced himself that leaving May was the noble thing to do, that he was protecting her from his dangerous life, that she was better off without him. But standing there alone, having seen the strength in May's eyes and the happiness of the son he didn't know, Jean finally understood the truth. He hadn't left to protect May. He had left to protect himself. He had been afraid of being vulnerable with another person, afraid of loving someone so much that it gave them power over him, afraid of changing his entire life to become the kind of man May deserved. So he had run away, and he had dressed up his cowardice as some kind of sacrifice. May Williams had shown more courage in one day than Jean had shown in years. She had faced her pregnancy alone. She had raised Daniel without help. She had built a life through pure determination and strength. While Jean had wallowed in guilt and self-pity, May had actually done the hard work of living. That night, Jean went back to his empty penthouse apartment. The place was modern and expensive, with a view of downtown Los Angeles that most people would dream of. But looking around at his perfectly decorated space, Jean realized it was completely empty of anything that actually mattered. He sat in the dark, thinking about May working double shifts while pregnant, thinking about her giving birth alone, thinking about her using her nursing school savings to buy diapers and formula while he lived in luxury, thinking about Daniel growing up without a father because Jean was too much of a coward to face his own mistakes. The next morning, Jean called a lawyer. Not a criminal lawyer, but a family law attorney. "I have a son," Jean explained during the consultation. "I haven't been part of his life, but I want to understand my legal rights and responsibilities. I want to know what I can do to support him financially." The lawyer explained child support laws, paternity rights, and the process for establishing legal fatherhood. Jean listened carefully, taking notes. "I don't want to force anything," Jean said. "The mother has made it clear she doesn't want me in their lives right now. But I want to make sure my son is taken care of. What can I do?" The lawyer helped Jean set up a trust fund for Daniel and a separate account in May's name for child support. It wouldn't fix what Jean had done, but it was a start. Next, Jean did something even more dangerous. He began the process of getting out of his criminal operations. Men in Jean's position didn't just walk away from the life. His business partners wouldn't let him go easily. There was too much money involved, too many secrets he knew. But Jean started anyway. He began selling off the illegal parts of his business, even when it meant taking huge financial losses. He cut ties with partners he had worked with for years. He turned down deals that would have made him millions. Every move he made created new enemies, but Jean kept going. He hired bodyguards to protect himself during this transition. He knew the danger was real. Former associates started making threats. But for the first time in his life, Jean was willing to risk everything for something that actually mattered. Jean also started seeing a therapist. His pride had never allowed it before. Therapy was for weak people, or so he had thought. But Jean was beginning to understand that real weakness was being too afraid to face your own problems. In therapy, Jean worked through his childhood trauma. He talked about coming to America and watching his family struggle. He talked about building walls around himself to survive. He talked about his fear of emotional connection and vulnerability. "I convinced myself that being alone was strength," Jean told his therapist during one session. "But really, I was just scared." 3 weeks after the airport encounter, Jean wrote a letter to May. He spent days working on it, trying to find the right words. Finally, he kept it simple and honest. He apologized. He took full responsibility for abandoning her. He explained that he was trying to become a better man, not for her forgiveness, but because it was the right thing to do. He told her about the bank account he had set up in her name and the trust fund for Daniel. When May received the letter in Chicago, she read it twice while sitting in her small apartment. Daniel was napping in his room. May had expected to feel angry, but instead, she just felt tired. She didn't need Jin's money. Mrs. Patterson's sister had given her a good deal on rent. Her scholarship covered most of her tuition. She had found a part-time job at a hospital that worked around her school schedule. They weren't rich, but May was managing. But May was also practical. She thought about Daniel's future, about college one day. about opportunities that money could provide. After thinking it over for several days, May decided to accept the money. But she wouldn't spend it on herself. Every dollar went directly into the trust fund for Daniel's education. She wanted her son to have choices she never had. May wrote a short reply to Jean. She thanked him for the financial support, but made it clear that money didn't fix the past. She told him she was focused on school and raising Daniel. She said that if Jean was serious about changing, he should prove it with his actions, not his words. That letter started a slow, careful exchange between them. Jean didn't push for more than May was willing to give. Once a month, he would send a brief letter updating her on his progress. May would respond with equally brief notes, sometimes mentioning Daniel's milestones, sometimes just acknowledging his letter. Meanwhile, May was thriving in Chicago. Nursing school was challenging, especially while raising a 3-year-old, but May discovered she loved it. She was good with patients during her clinical rotations. Her natural kindness and warmth made people feel comfortable, even when they were scared or in pain. Her professors noticed her dedication. Her classmates admired how she balanced school and motherhood. May made friends, built a support system, and started to feel like Chicago was truly home. Daniel grew into a bright, happy 4-year-old. He loved dinosaurs and could name every species. He asked a million questions about everything. He was kind to other children and had his mother's warm personality. May looked at her son and felt proud of what she had built. She dated a few people casually, but nothing serious. Part of her heart was still healing from Jean, though she was honest enough with herself to admit it. But May wasn't waiting around for Jean either. She was building a life based on her own goals, her own strength, her own happiness. Months passed. Jin's transformation was slow but real. He sold off the most dangerous parts of his business, even when former partners threatened him. He cut ties with people who had been in his life for years. He lost money and made enemies, but he kept moving forward. 18 months after the airport meeting, Jean sent May a different kind of letter. This one included a newspaper article from the Los Angeles Times. The headline read, "Local businessman testifies against former associates in federal case." Jin's letter explained what he had done. He had been working with federal prosecutors for months, helping them build a case against the criminal network he had once been part of. He was testifying in court, which was extremely dangerous. People had been killed for less. He told May he wasn't sharing this information to impress her or to ask for anything. He just wanted her to know that if something happened to him, his lawyer had instructions. Everything Jean owned would go into the trust for Daniel. But more than that, Jean wanted May to know she had been right at the airport. Biology didn't make him a father. He hadn't earned that title. But he was trying to become someone who might be worthy of it someday. May read Jin's letter sitting at her small kitchen table. Daniel was at preschool, and the apartment was quiet. She read about the federal case, about Jean testifying against dangerous criminals, about the arrangements he had made in case something happened to him. Her first reaction surprised her. Despite everything Jean had done, despite the pain he had caused, May didn't want him to die. She realized something important in that moment. Somewhere during their slow correspondence over the past year and a half, her anger had changed. It had transformed into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. May understood now that Jean had been broken in his own way. His abandonment hadn't been about her worth or her value. It had been about his own fear and weakness. Understanding didn't excuse what he had done, but it freed May from something heavy she had been carrying. For 2 years, May had wondered what she had done wrong. She had questioned herself, blamed herself, thought maybe she wasn't good enough. But now she saw clearly that Jin's choices had always been about Jean, not about her. That understanding lifted a weight off May's shoulders. She had spent too much energy trying to figure out what was wrong with her, when nothing had been wrong with her at all. For the first time since the airport, May picked up the phone and called the emergency number Jean had left in his letters. Jean answered on the second ring. His voice was shocked. "May, I read your letter," May said quietly. "The one about the court case." "Oh," Jean sounded nervous. "I didn't expect you to call. Are you safe right now?" May asked. There was a pause. "I have protection. Federal marshals are watching me. But yes, there's danger." "Good. I mean, not good that there's danger. Good that you have protection." May took a breath. "Jean, I need you to understand something. I don't know if you'll ever be part of Daniel's life. I don't know if I can fully trust you, but I don't want you to die trying to prove yourself. May I? Let me finish, May interrupted gently. Daniel might want to know you someday. He might have questions about his father, and I'd rather he has the option to meet you than to visit your grave. So stay alive. Be smart. Don't get yourself killed. Jin's voice was thick with emotion when he spoke. Thank you. That means more than you know. Don't thank me yet, May said. Just stay safe. When all this is over, when you're not in danger anymore, maybe you can come to Chicago. Not to see Daniel, not yet. He's too young to understand. But maybe we can talk. Really talk as adults. Maybe we can figure out what the future looks like. I would like that very much, Jean said softly. Then make sure you survive to see it happen, May said. Goodbye, Jean. After she hung up, May sat for a long time thinking. She had reached a point of real healing. She didn't need Jean to validate her anymore. She didn't need his apology to move forward. She didn't need him to fix the past. May had built a good life through her own strength and determination. She was succeeding in nursing school. She was raising a happy, healthy child. She had friends and a future. None of that depended on Jean. But May also realized something else. Forgiveness wasn't about whether Jean deserved it. Forgiveness was about May choosing not to carry the weight of his mistakes anymore. It was about freeing herself from anger and bitterness so she could live fully. May had forgiven Jean. Not because he had earned it, but because she needed her own peace. 6 months passed. The federal case concluded in early spring. Jin's testimony helped convict several high-ranking members of the criminal organization. The news covered the trial extensively. May saw Jin's name in the articles, but didn't reach out. She figured he would contact her when he was ready. As part of the witness protection arrangement, Jean was allowed to relocate. He chose Chicago. The federal prosecutors agreed, setting him up with a new identity and a fresh start. Jean got a job managing a warehouse for a legitimate import company. The pay was a fraction of what he used to make, but the money was honest. He rented a modest one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. He continued his therapy sessions with a new counselor in Chicago. His life looked completely different now. No expensive suits, no penthouse, no luxury cars. Just a regular guy with a regular job, living a simple life. And for the first time in years, Jean felt like he could breathe. In late April, Jean called May. The case is over. I'm in Chicago now. Safe. Can we meet? May agreed. She arranged for Daniel to stay with a friend for a few hours. This first real conversation needed to be just between them, without a 3-year-old asking questions. On a Saturday afternoon, Jean knocked on May's apartment door. His hands were shaking slightly. He wore simple jeans and a sweater, looking more casual than May had ever seen him. May opened the door. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Jean looked different. Less polished, less guarded. The hardness that used to be in his eyes had softened. Hi, Jean said simply. Hi, May replied. Come in. Her apartment was small but cozy. Pictures of Daniel covered the walls. His toys were scattered in one corner. A bookshelf held nursing textbooks and children's books side by side. It was clearly a home filled with love. They sat in May's living room, drinking coffee. The silence felt awkward at first. Finally, Jean spoke. I don't know where to start. Start with the truth, May said firmly. All of it. Who you really were. What you were really doing. Why you really left. I need to hear everything before we can move forward in any way. So Jean told her. He told her about his family coming from Korea when he was 12. About his father's business failing. About being poor and hungry and scared. About falling into the criminal world as a teenager because it seemed like the only way to survive. He told her about building his organization over the years. About the money laundering and illegal operations. About the violence he had witnessed and sometimes caused. About becoming someone hard and cold because that was how you survived in that world. Then he told her about meeting her at the diner. About how her kindness had shocked him because he had forgotten people could be genuinely good. About falling in love with her, but being terrified because love made him vulnerable. He told her about leaving. About convincing himself he was protecting her when really he was just afraid. Afraid to tell her the truth and see her love turn to disgust. Afraid to change his life for someone else. Afraid to be the kind of man she deserved. I was a coward, Jean said quietly. I loved you, but I was too weak to choose you over my own fear. May listened to all of it without interrupting. When Jean finished, she was quiet for a long time. Thank you for being honest, May finally said. I needed to hear that. All of it. Do you hate me? Jean asked. May thought about the question carefully. No, I did for a while. I was angry for a long time. But hate takes too much energy, and I needed that energy for school and for Daniel. Now I'm just sad about all the time we lost. Sad that you couldn't trust me with the truth. Sad that Daniel grew up without a father because you were too scared. I'm sorry, Jean said, and May could hear the genuine pain in his voice. I know you are, May said, and I appreciate your apology. But Jean, being sorry doesn't change what happened. The question now is, what do we do moving forward? I want to know my son, Jean said carefully. I want to be there for him if you'll allow it. I'm not asking to suddenly replace the life you've built. I'm not asking to play house. I just want a chance to be his father. May looked at Jean for a long moment, studying his face. She was looking for signs of the old Jean, the one who ran when things got hard. But the man sitting across from her seemed different, changed. Being a father isn't about biology or money, May said slowly. It's about showing up. It's about being consistent, even when it's boring or hard. It's about putting Daniel's needs before your own wants. It's about being there for the everyday moments, not just the fun times. Can you really do that? I want to try, Jean said. I know I'll probably make mistakes. I don't know anything about being a father, but I want to learn. I want to try. May nodded slowly. Okay, but we go very slow. You don't get to just show up and suddenly be dad. Daniel doesn't know you. He's 4 years old, and you're a stranger to him. We'll start with you being a friend of mine who visits sometimes. Maybe we meet at parks or go for walks. You'll have to earn his trust and his love naturally. And if at any point I feel like this is hurting Daniel instead of helping him, we stop immediately. His well-being comes first. Always. I agree completely, Jean said. Whatever you think is best for Daniel. I'll follow your lead. They talked for hours that afternoon, setting clear boundaries and expectations. They discussed schedules and rules. They talked about what May would tell Daniel and how to introduce Jean into his life slowly. By the time they finished, they had the beginning of a plan. It wasn't perfect, and there were no guarantees. But it was a start. The following week, May told Daniel about Jean in the simplest way possible. Remember the man we saw at the airport before we moved here? May asked while they colored together at the kitchen table. Daniel looked up from his dinosaur drawing. The man who looked sad? May was surprised Daniel remembered, but children noticed more than adults realized. Yes, that man. His name is Jean. He's a friend of Mama's from before you were born. He lives in Chicago now, and he might come visit us sometimes. Would that be okay? Daniel shrugged, already back to coloring his dinosaur. Okay. Can he color with us? Maybe, May said, smiling at how simple things were in a 4-year-old's world. The first meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday at a park near May's apartment. Jean arrived 15 minutes early, nervous in a way he had never been before facing business rivals or dangerous situations. May and Daniel showed up right on time. Daniel wore his favorite dinosaur shirt and light-up sneakers. He held his mother's hand, looking around the playground with excitement. Jean stood by a bench, wearing jeans and a simple jacket. When May and Daniel approached, he felt his heart racing. Daniel, this is my friend Jean, May said gently. Jean, this is Daniel. Jean got down on one knee, so he was at Daniel's eye level. He had read somewhere that you should never tower over small children because it made them nervous. Hi, Daniel, Jean said softly. Your mom told me you really like dinosaurs. Daniel's face lit up. I love dinosaurs. Do you know about dinosaurs? I know a little bit, Jean said. But I bet you know a lot more than me. Maybe you can teach me. Daniel nodded enthusiastically. I know all the dinosaurs. T-Rex and Triceratops and Stegosaurus and Velociraptor and... Wow, Jean said, genuinely impressed. That's a lot of names. You're really smart. Daniel beamed at the praise. Mama says I'm smart too. Your mama is right, Jean said, glancing up at May who was watching carefully. They spent an hour at the park. Daniel played on the swings and the slide while May and Jean sat on a bench nearby. Jean asked May about nursing school, and she told him about her classes and clinical rotations. The conversation was polite, but still a bit stiff. Daniel ran over periodically to share discoveries. A cool stick, an interesting rock, a bug he found. Each time, Jean listened with genuine interest, asking questions and responding to Daniel's endless chatter. You talk funny. Daniel said at one point, tilting his head as he listened to Jean. Jean smiled. I was born in a different country called Korea. Sometimes my accent comes out when I talk. Where's Korea? Daniel asked. It's very far away across the ocean, Jean explained. It's a beautiful place with mountains and cities and lots of delicious food. Do they have dinosaurs there? Daniel asked seriously. Not anymore, Jean said. But they have stories about dragons. Korean dragons are very different from the dragons in your storybooks. Daniel's eyes went wide. Tell me about the dragons. Jean told Daniel a Korean folk tale about a dragon that lived in a mountain and protected a village. Daniel listened with complete focus, interrupting occasionally to ask questions. May watched her son's face light up with wonder and felt her chest tighten. When it was time to leave, Daniel waved happily at Jean. Bye. Tell me more dragon stories next time. I will, Jean promised. After they left, Jean sat in his car for a long time, his hands shaking. He had just spent time with his son who was smart and kind and full of life. His son who didn't know Jean was his father, but had smiled at him anyway. The visits continued like this. Every 2 weeks at first, then weekly as Daniel got more comfortable. They always met in public places, parks, museums, the library. Jean never pushed for more time than May offered. He brought small, thoughtful gifts occasionally. A book about dragons for Daniel. Good coffee for May. Nothing expensive or extravagant, just simple things that showed he was paying attention. Jean was patient in a way he had never been before. When Daniel was shy, Jean gave him space. When Daniel wanted to play, Jean played. When Daniel just wanted to sit and talk about dinosaurs for an hour, Jean listened. Slowly, Daniel started warming up to him. He began looking forward to their visits. He started calling him Mr. Jean at first, which eventually became just Jean, when Daniel had trouble saying it properly. The nickname stuck. May watched all of this carefully. She was always present during the visits, always protective. But as months passed, she started to relax. Jean showed up when he said he would. He was patient with Daniel's moods. He didn't try to buy Daniel's affection with expensive toys. He just showed up consistently and genuinely. One day, Daniel had a complete meltdown at the park because another child took his favorite swing. He threw himself on the ground crying. May moved to comfort him, but Jean was already there, sitting down next to Daniel on the grass. That's really frustrating, isn't it? Jean said calmly. You were waiting for that swing. Daniel nodded, still crying. It's okay to feel upset, Jean continued. But we can't yell at other kids. How about we go play on the slide until the swing is free again? To May's surprise, Daniel nodded and let Jean help him up. They walked to the slide together, Daniel's small hand in Jean's larger one. May felt tears in her eyes watching them. Jean hadn't gotten frustrated or impatient. He had just been calm and kind, meeting Daniel where he was. As the year went on, Jean became a regular part of their lives. He came to Daniel's preschool graduation, sitting in the back and clapping loudly when Daniel's name was called. He helped May carry groceries when he ran into them at the store. He watched Daniel at the park so May could study for important exams. He never overstepped. He never tried to make parenting decisions or question May's rules. He just supported them both in small, consistent ways. One evening in late summer, after Daniel had gone to bed, May and Jean sat on her small balcony. The Chicago evening was warm, and they could hear the city sounds below. Can I ask you something? May said. Anything, Jean replied. Are you happy? With this life, I mean. It's so different from what you had before. Jean was quiet for a moment, thinking. The life I had before was built on lies and fear and violence. I had money and power, but inside I felt empty. Every day I woke up wondering if that would be the day someone betrayed me or the police caught me. I trusted no one, and no one really knew me. He paused, looking out at the city. Now I work an honest job. I live in a small apartment. I spend my free time playing with a 4-year-old and reading books about dinosaurs. And May, I've never been happier. This life is real. It matters. When I go to bed at night, I feel good about who I am and what I'm doing. That's worth more than all the money I used to have. May smiled. That's a good answer. Can I ask you something? Jean said carefully. Okay. Do you think you'll ever really forgive me? Not just say you forgive me, but actually feel it. May thought about it honestly. I think I already have. Not all at once, and not because you necessarily earned it, but because I realized that holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. Forgiving you was a gift I gave myself. Jean nodded slowly. And us? Do you think there's a chance for us? Not now, I know it's too soon. But someday. May looked at him carefully. I don't know, Jean. I loved you once, but that person and that relationship are gone. You're different now. I'm different now. We're basically two new people getting to know each other. Maybe we can become good friends. Maybe more, eventually. But that can't be the goal. The goal has to be what's best for Daniel. You're right, Jean said. I just needed to know if there was any hope at all. There's always hope, May said softly. That's one thing I've learned through all of this. There's always hope for people to change, for situations to improve, for wounds to heal. But hope requires work and time and patience. Jean smiled. I have time, and I'm learning patience. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Two people who had broken each other were slowly learning how to build something new. Not the romance they had before, but something different. Something built on honesty, growth, and earned trust. Inside, Daniel slept peacefully, dreaming of dinosaurs and dragons, safe and loved. He had a mother who would do anything for him, and a father who was learning what it meant to show up. It wasn't a perfect family, but it was becoming a real one. 2 years after that day at the airport, May walked across the stage at her nursing school graduation. She wore a blue cap and gown, and when her name was called, the applause from the audience seemed extra loud. In the third row sat Jean and Daniel. Daniel, now 5 years old, stood on his chair clapping and shouting, "That's my mama." Jean held Daniel steady with one hand while clapping with the other, a huge smile on his face. May saw them and waved. Her heart felt so full it might burst. She had done it. Through everything, single motherhood, financial struggles, long study nights, difficult exams. She had finished nursing school at the top of her class. After the ceremony, they met outside. Daniel ran to May and hugged her legs tight. "Mama, you did it. You're a nurse now," he said excitedly. May picked him up and kissed his face. "I am, baby. We did it together." Jean stood back a bit, giving them their moment. When May looked at him, he stepped forward. "Congratulations, May," he said warmly. "You should be really proud." "Thank you," May said. "Thank you for being here. It means a lot." Over the past year, Jean had become a steady presence in their lives. Daniel now knew that Jean was his biological father. May had explained it in simple terms when Daniel turned 5 and started asking questions about why he didn't have a dad like his friends did. Jean is your father," May had told him gently. "He wasn't around when you were a baby because he made some mistakes. But he's working hard to be better, and he loves you very much." Daniel had accepted this information with the easy adaptability of children. He didn't call Jean Dad or Daddy. That title felt too big for their still-growing relationship. But Jean felt right. It was their own special name. Jean had never pushed for more. He understood that being a father was something you earned through actions, not something you demanded because of DNA. If Daniel wanted to call him Dad someday, it would be because Jean had earned that honor through years of showing up and being present. After the graduation, they went to dinner at a modest Italian restaurant in May's neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but the food was good and the atmosphere was warm. Daniel chattered nonstop about the graduation ceremony and how proud he was of his mama. When their food arrived, Jean pulled a small wrapped box from his jacket pocket and handed it to May. "I got you something," he said, "for your graduation." May unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a stethoscope, professional quality, with her initials engraved on the chest piece, MW. May's eyes filled with tears. "Jean, this is beautiful. You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Jean said quietly. "You worked so hard for this. You deserve something special to mark the achievement." May ran her fingers over the engraving. "Thank you. Really. I'll treasure this." Daniel wanted to try the stethoscope, so May let him listen to his own heartbeat. His face lit up with wonder at hearing the sound. "I can hear my heart, Mama. It goes boom, boom, boom," Daniel said. They all laughed. It was a simple moment, but it was filled with genuine happiness. After dinner, they walked back to May's apartment together. The Chicago evening was beautiful, with a soft breeze and the sun setting in shades of orange and pink. Daniel walked between May and Jean, reaching up to hold both their hands. "Swing me," Daniel demanded, and they lifted him up, swinging him gently as they walked. Daniel giggled with pure joy. To anyone passing by, they looked like any other family. A mother, a father, and their child, enjoying a nice evening together. But the reality was more complicated and more beautiful than appearances suggested. This family hadn't been built on romance or traditional expectations. It had been built on accountability, on growth, on mistakes acknowledged and worked through. It had been built on hard-earned trust and genuine change. May had learned powerful lessons through her journey. She had discovered she was stronger than she ever imagined. When Jean left her pregnant and alone, she could have given up. She could have become bitter or broken. Instead, she had worked harder than ever. She had raised a beautiful child. She had pursued her dreams despite impossible obstacles. May learned that she didn't need someone else to complete her or save her. She had saved herself, and that strength would stay with her forever. She also learned that forgiveness was possible, even for deep wounds. But forgiveness wasn't about the person who hurt you. It was about freeing yourself. May had forgiven Jean not because he deserved it, but because she refused to carry the weight of his mistakes for the rest of her life. That forgiveness had given her peace. Jean had learned different, but equally important lessons. He had learned that real courage wasn't about facing down enemies or building an empire. Real courage was about being vulnerable enough to admit when you were wrong. Real courage was about changing yourself even when it was hard and scary. Jean had learned that being a father was about showing up. Not just once, not just when it was convenient, but consistently. Day after day, week after week, being present and reliable. It was about putting Daniel's needs before his own wants. It was about earning trust through actions, not demanding respect because of biology. He learned that the simple life he had now, modest apartment, regular job, weekends at the park, was worth more than all the wealth and power he had before. Because this life was built on truth. This life had meaning. Daniel, young as he was learning his own lessons. He was learning that families come in different shapes. Some kids had a mom and a dad who lived together. Daniel had a mom who was his whole world, and a Jean who visited and played with him. That was okay. Different wasn't bad. Daniel was learning that people could make mistakes and then work to be better. His mama had told him that Jean hadn't been around when Daniel was a baby, but he was here now. People could change. People could grow. Most importantly, Daniel was learning that love was shown through actions. His mama loved him by working hard and taking care of him every day. Jean loved him by showing up for playdates and remembering his favorite stories and being patient when Daniel was grumpy. Love wasn't just words. Love was what you did. As they reached May's apartment building, Daniel yawned. It had been a long, exciting day. "Someone's tired," May said, ruffling his hair. "I'm not tired," Daniel protested, even as he yawned again. Jean knelt down to Daniel's level. "You were a very good boy today. Your mama is lucky to have you cheering for her." Jean, will you read me a dragon story before bed?" Daniel asked. Jean looked at May, asking silent permission. May nodded. "I'd love to," Jean said. Inside the apartment, Daniel changed into his pajamas while May made tea. Jean sat on the couch, looking at the photos on May's walls. Pictures of Daniel at different ages. May at her nursing school white coat ceremony. Daniel's preschool artwork. A life built moment by moment. Daniel came running out with his favorite book about Korean dragons. Jean read to him, doing different voices for the characters. Daniel laughed and asked questions. May watched from the doorway, her heart full. When the story ended, Daniel hugged Jean goodnight. "Bye, Jean. Come back soon, okay?" "I will," Jean promised. "I always will." After May put Daniel to bed, she and Jean stood at her apartment door. "Thank you for today," May said. "For being here. For being consistent. For proving me right." "Right about what?" Jean asked. "That people can change if they really want to. That mistakes don't have to define us forever. That there's always hope." Jean smiled. "You gave me that hope, May. You and Daniel. You gave me a reason to become better." "No," May said gently. "We gave you an opportunity. But you did the work. You made the choice to change. That was all you." They said goodnight, and Jean left. May closed the door and leaned against it, thinking about how far they had all come. 3 years ago, she had been a waitress with broken dreams and a broken heart. Now she was a nurse with a bright future. 3 years ago, Jean had been a criminal living a lie. Now he was an honest man building a real life. 3 years ago, they had been two people who hurt each other. Now they were two people learning to trust again. The journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead. But they were facing those challenges as better versions of themselves. The most important lesson from their story was simple but powerful. Your past doesn't determine your future. Your choices today do. May had chosen strength when she could have chosen bitterness. She had chosen to pursue her dreams when it would have been easier to give up. She had chosen to forgive when she could have held on to anger forever. Jean had chosen change when he could have stayed the same. He had chosen honesty when lies were easier. He had chosen to show up, day after day, when running away was what he knew best. And because of those choices, Daniel was growing up in a home filled with love. He had a mother who showed him what strength and determination looked like. He had a father who was learning what it meant to be present and accountable. Daniel would grow up knowing that people could make terrible mistakes and still become better. He would know that families didn't have to look a certain way to be real. He would know that love was proven through actions, not just words. These lessons would shape the man Daniel would become. And that was the greatest gift May and Jean could give him. Not a perfect family, but an honest one. Not parents who never made mistakes, but parents who faced their mistakes and grew from them. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We bring you powerful stories about real people facing real challenges and finding real hope. Your comments and support mean everything to us, and we read every single one. Tomorrow we have another incredible story that you won't want to miss. Thank you for being part of our community. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories.